Hello and welcome from Johannesburg, South Africa, for the very first TikTok Live under the hashtag TikTok for Peace campaign. I'd like to welcome every one of you today. Today we'll be talking about a very important topic. I think mental health is something that's affected many of us, and if we look at stats, 1 in 3 people in South Africa will experience some sort of mental illness at some point in their lives. So, and this conversation is very important, but also very difficult. So at any time, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you feel like you need to speak to someone, I'm from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. My name is Fatima. And if ever you need to speak to someone, remember there is a 24-hour helpline that's open every single day of the year. And we will share the helpline with you throughout today's conversation. Today's topic is destigmatizing mental health and setting healthy boundaries in work and play. And many of our audience today are from universities currently studying, our viewers as well, between studying, working. So it is important that we want to empower everyone that's viewing us today, but also that are here in our audience today, to speak openly about what they are going through, being able to identify the spectrum of all the difficulties and challenges that you go through, but then knowing where exactly to get the help that you may need at some point in your lives. We are very lucky to have a very extraordinary panel with me today. I'd like to introduce my panelists. I'll start with Sikandar Kala. He is one of the people that made the list of 30 under 30, a clinical psychologist, and he's a mental health advocate. I have Vanessa Seki, got your surname right? A yoga teacher, a brand strategist, and a wellness entrepreneur. And also, she's had lived experience with depression and anxiety. We have Sanam Naran, a clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist, and also the founder of Conscious Psychologies. We have Anele Siswana, who is the director of Indigo Wellness and Consulting Services that specializes in men in mental health, culture and mental health, and there was one more.
Queer studies.
Yeah, so LGBTIQ plus studies as well. Okay, so to begin the discussion today, I'd like to bring in Sanam. Understanding what mental health is important. So I think in our conversation today, we need to start defining what exactly is mental health. Sanam, can you please explain what mental health is?
Sure. So mental health is basically the health of your mind, and this involves your emotional health, your psychological health, as well as your social well-being. It's the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave, how we bounce back from difficult experiences in our life, how we bounce back from different stressors in our life. I think in a nutshell, that's what mental health is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just to bring in the discussion and just to give a more context to what we are talking about today, World Mental Health Day is on the 10th of October. October is Mental Health Month. So the more awareness we create during the month, the more better people understand what mental health is. So when you're going through your daily challenges and things that you go through on a daily basis, at least then we are able to go and seek the help that we need if we ever do come across a challenging time. The theme for this year is prioritizing your mental health. So it's again tying in very well with our discussion today. And I'd like to ask Sikandar, why is it so important to prioritize your mental health?
I think for me, looking at the importance of it always emanates from our full awareness of prevention is better than cure. And I think if we develop sufficient self-awareness revolving around our mental health difficulties, you then are able to catch things in their tracks before they worsen and before they exacerbate. I think another big reason also, and particularly in the South African context, is nothing happens in a vacuum. You know, we're all subject to the elements in the South African context. That's systemic and structural factors as well. That's different socioeconomic status, that's job insecurity, that's financial insecurity. All of these things play a role. There's also familial dynamics, there's substance use dynamics. So everything comes into play, and if we don't prioritize our mental health, we're not able then to maneuver and navigate through some of these challenges. And I think the sooner we start getting a grasp on the importance of that, the sooner we can educate those around us about it as well. And then we have almost a community level drive for us taking care of one another within the same structural, socioeconomic and systemic issues that we face.
I think so, and as we can see, a lot of our audience today are going into the workplace, and it is going to be a challenging part of their lives just to get integrated into the workspace, especially with the high levels of unemployment at the moment. So learning to prioritize your mental health and learning to sort of cope and learn different coping mechanisms will help you deal with different situations at different times when you are going through something. We'd like to show a video just to give some context to our conversation today. So let's have a look at it.
What I worry about on a day-to-day basis is, for now, it's school. I have things to sort out for school for me. What I worry most about is achieving my goals in life is very important to me. That's my biggest worry always.
What my worries are, I worry about school, I worry about my family, I'm worried about career choices, yeah, just in general life.
Just going through life, not knowing what will happen tomorrow, not knowing what will happen in the future. I think that's like the biggest thing, like, you know.
Well, I get worried about my workload and just finding the purpose and meaning in life sometimes, because sometimes you just get so confused with all the clutter and everything that's going.
What am I anxious about on a day-to-day basis? I would say bringing past mistakes into my future.
Employment, basically, but like permanent employment and employment that I can depend on. Because now lately after I graduated, I've kind of had that struggle of just looking for a job that will keep me permanently rather than internships constantly. But that's the only one, yeah.
I'm usually worried about school, assignments, obviously, and also just getting my work done, and also cleaning the house most of the time. Nothing much.
We've just viewed a video of people explaining what they've been going through and the different challenges they've been going through. And I'd like to bring in the audience right now and ask, what are the different challenges that you are going through at the moment? What types of things that maybe may affect you on a daily basis? Is there anyone that would like to share something with us? What are some of the challenges that you think youth of today are going through that maybe they need that extra type of help? Or maybe if you bring it up and we discuss, different coping strategies, maybe it will help them.
One of the main challenges that we face as youth is self-realization, knowledge of self. Right? I think that's where it starts. That's how you combat all of these mental issues that you're facing. And remembering that, as much as there's one of you, there are about 1 billion problems in the world. And there's only so much that you can do in that moment. I think that has helped me so much with my anxiety. Sometimes I'll be in a situation I'm panicking, but I'm realizing I'm in this moment right now. There's very little that I can do now. So let me just embrace this moment and let me do what I possibly can do. And I think that's not just for myself, but a lot of people actually battle with that. You'll find, and I'll take it up a notch and say, social media can bring you to that point, especially
you know, in a space where you're constantly being introduced to problems of the world, problems of the people around you, you somewhat realize that you form part of a bigger picture. So it's always important to be aware of yourself and realize that in this moment, I have me and there's little that I can do.
I think that he's brought up some very important points. And as you are growing into the individual that you are and you're going into the workspace, you're sort of also starting to build your identity, because that's when you start shaping yourself into a person. And I'd like to bring Anele into this. Anele, how important is it to be self-aware of yourself and learning about creating your identity?
I think for me, it's about understanding that people need first the language that will capacitate them to first understand what self-awareness is in the world that is full of different possibilities about what self means. And so for me, if I look at the student context of university, that's the time where people form and develop who they want to be professionally, but also in terms of formation. But I think for us to be able to get to that point, and one of the things that usually help people to have self-awareness and better understanding of self is through therapy. But how many people, if you can ask here, how many students and people are in therapy? Quite a few that would attest to that. So therapy would give you the space and the language to do that. But I would encourage that at a very young age, and as you grow, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with spaces that will help you with the language that you need, that will then enable you to go deeper into doing what we call introspection, because you can't do introspection if you have no reference of where to start.
I think I'll bring Bonella in here. And being Vanessa, and bringing yourself, going through, you know, your experience with depression and anxiety. What was the main turning points where you realized that this was the time you needed help?
Oh, when I needed help, because I experienced it when I was quite young, and my mom's a psychologist, so she was able to identify it. I was only 15, so I wasn't the one who identified it. She was the one who had, and it was at a point where I guess I was feeling so much, and a lot of people confuse this with suicide, and it's not. Though I mean, I did have suicide thoughts, but I didn't attempt it. It's more cutting. And cutting occurs when you're feeling so much at the time, I become numb to my feelings, and then you start to cut yourself in inconspicuous places so you feel, even if it's pain, it's better than feeling nothing. And so I think when my mom started to notice that I was doing that, that's when she kind of rang the alarm.
Okay. So Vanessa is fortunate that she's been around her mom that was able to pick up the symptoms and the signs. But in most cases, students are living by themselves or are on their own, or they have parents that don't have much knowledge about mental health, and students don't know where to go and get the help. Sikandar, how best can we help those people that cannot afford getting psychiatric help on a professional level? Or how do we encourage them to go out and get the help they need from public facilities if there are services available?
I think it starts with platforms like this, you know. I think we need to have more conversations like this, because the more we speak about it, the more we normalize it. And the more we normalize it, the more we destigmatize it. And in destigmatizing it, we then start feeling a greater sense of comfort to reaching out to those that we've established some level of comfort with. And that could be anyone. It could be a close friend, it could be a family member, it could be a loved one, it could be a community member. But that doesn't start, you know, just like a light switch moment. That is something that is built over time. And I think we need to make a concerted effort in speaking about this, because you'd find that we feel ashamed, we feel a sense of unease, we don't want to open up in a vulnerable manner. But the reason we don't want to do that also is because we feel like it's only happening to us. You know, and I think the more we share, the more we speak about it, the more we realize that we may have differences in our difficulties, But part of being human is we know fundamental emotions like sadness, disappointment, rejection, failure. You know, those are emotions that we all share. I do think it's platforms like this that go a really long way.
Yes, I totally agree with you. The more I notice, even on community level when we work in townships, the more we spoke about mental health and the more we created awareness around it and the more we went out and we handed out brochures, information, more people became aware of what mental health or mental illness was, what was depression, what was feeling sad, what is anxiety, and they were more open to going out to seek the help they need. And that's when they used to reach out to us and then, get the help that they did need. So yes, platforms, being able to speak openly. Like I said, 1 in 3 people are going to have some sort of mental illness throughout their life. And if you can look at that stat, if you look at the audience today and the viewers today, 1 in 3. So you're not alone. There are people out there that may not go through something same, but there are people going through something. And the more we talk about it, the more we learn from each other, because I may be going through something similar to you. And by that, we can share our ideas and we learn to cope between ourselves as well. So it's shared information again. Vanessa, you went into yoga and the wellness. How did that come about, and was it because you finding yourself going through your experience that led you to go through something like that?
So how I came across yoga is once I'd been diagnosed with bipolar 2. I was put on medication, and it wasn't helping because similar to the emotions I was experiencing, the medication that I was prescribed just made me numb. So that was a sacrifice. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel pain, I didn't feel happiness, and that was too much of a sacrifice. And I was at UCT, and UCT has got more, or Cape Town has a bit more of a holistic approach to things. And at school there was an organization called Art of Living where I learned about breathing techniques, and I just completed reading a book by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. And so I started to make the connection between my mind and my breath and my state of, and how I was able to use tools to kind of heal myself. And when I went through the Sudarshan Kriya and I went through meditation, I found that I was able to balance my mind in the way that I hoped the medication would do. But obviously this is case by case. I wouldn't say everyone should now throw their meds away and do yoga, but in my situation, I was fortunate enough to be able to meditate instead of medicate.
Okay. Yeah, I think with different people, different coping strategies work best. So, Sanam, what type of, a lot of our audience today may not afford to get the help that they need, but what type of coping strategies and what type of things they can do for themselves just to keep their mental well-being in check? Maybe you could discuss a few strategies or information.
So I think it's important to know that, even though therapy is really expensive, that there are places that are accessible and are affordable and are free. So I would say, as a coping strategy, as a way to be able to look after your mental health, is to get yourself into counseling and therapy. But then there are also other ways that are, obviously free, which is what we hear a lot is, exercise, eat the right kinds of foods, meditation, yoga, spending time with friends, spending time with people and family. I think relationships, fulfilling relationships are so important. And I think just doing things that make you feel good, but to remember that there are healthy coping strategies and then there are also the unhealthy coping strategies. And I think also something that Anele mentioned was introspection. I think introspection is such an important coping mechanism. To be able to know yourself really well, to be able to know, what your triggers are when you're getting burnt out, when you're, bordering on becoming very stressed out. I think knowing yourself is super important.
And do you think that journaling could help you with learning more about yourself and help you with your introspection maybe?
So I think journaling is really good if that's what you like to do. So there are people who really don't like to write. What I specifically really like to do is to record myself speaking. So sometimes it's strange to some people, but it's almost like journaling. Instead of writing your thoughts and your feelings, to just say it out loud, record yourself or don't, but just to get it out there, it's quite therapeutic.
Yes. And I'd like to maybe we bring in another video, just so we can create more conversation around our audience as well.
My coping mechanisms are always positivity. I always try and find positivity in everything. I know that even in the worst situation, if I see a positive side to it, it helps me cope better.
I'd like to start my mornings off with a prayer, a form of meditation. I feel like this sets the tone of the day. And oftentimes, sometimes I do get those days where I don't feel like waking up in the morning and
Sometimes I try to go back and see how I could adjust the mistakes I've made in the past and how to fix them and fixate myself on the future. Other times I try to just listen to music to block everything out or read. I really like to write as well. Music, and I dance quite a lot, yeah.
My coping mechanism is to stay busy so that I don't think too much about it.
I either chat to my friends or I seek advice from them. I work out. I just get involved in sport. That's normally my de-stress, my mechanism.
Being closer to God, being closer to my friends, being closer in terms of the way I'm connected spiritually and all of that. So that keeps me going on a day-to-day.
For the most part, it's just staying at home, doing something chill.
And I'd like to bring the audience back in again. We have a great panel of experts at the moment, and you have an opportunity to ask questions and to learn from them. So please.
Hi guys. So I have a question, right? Someone in the videos mentioned something about using work as a coping mechanism, right? And that's what I tend to do, right? So I'm in the entertainment business, whatever. And for me to block out whenever I'm feeling
really depressed or anxious, I try and work a lot. I find things to do. I look for stuff to do.
And when I don't have stuff to do, I start thinking, right? So what's the best approach to that? Like, how do you move? And I think also another thing is a lot of people around here use social media to make a living, right? And we constantly have to stay on social media like all the time. I use this because you don't really have to, but that's what we think, right? And it turns out that social media sometimes can be such a toxic place, right? So how do we navigate? How do we know, okay, you know what, let me put my mental health first and let me put it above the money or the bag, as they call it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anela, do you want to maybe tackle this one?
Yeah, I think around work and managing the demands of work, we need to understand that overworking yourself could be a maladaptive coping behavior. So you need to understand the reasons why you are doing that. Then you will understand that at the end of the day, not all the time work can be your safe space, because it could also be a trigger of your anxiety that you constantly need to work. And we all know the idea around work-life balance, that it can't be that work is the only thing, but it also depends on the kind of work that you do. If you do work that has to do with physical strength, and in the entertainment industry, how difficult it is having to live on gigs and that can also be kind of straining. So one needs to find a balance and understand why you are using it as a coping mechanism. Around social media, I understand brand influencing work and endorsements that come with it, and I must say that space is not for everyone. We need to understand that. It's a space that requires a lot of social capital for you to be able to utilize it. So you need to be careful as well as to what kind of content that you post. If you're posting content that has to do with yourself, just understands that we're going to come for you, right? Because you're giving us leverage of saying something. And if you're struggling with issues of self-concept, confidence and all of that, it's going to be difficult. If you go on Twitter, as an example, there you're going to be demolished. That Twitter is going to deal with you. So you need to be careful of presentations around social media. If it's about work, you must know it's all about work and what kind of work. And really, guys, it's not for everyone. So it's a matter of just navigating that space quite carefully. Even us as professionals who engage with social media, we are very careful. Sikanda would agree with me, our board of ethics is very strict about what we do, what we post. We don't have the leverage of saying, here's my best client, I had the best time today. You guys do appreciation posts about us, which makes us awkward. So all of those kind of things, they really play a factor. But I just want to highlight with something that I had over the place of spirituality in the work that we do. I do a lot of that because I'm a traditional healer as well. So the point of first reference, Ekasi, or in rural areas, we see a traditional healer in Nyanga or a prophet and all of that when there's mental illness. Because we believe our conception is either utarati, somewhere, somehow, someone is lawyering you, or somewhere, somehow, your ancestors are angry at you. The presentation looks like mental health, right? Or it looks like mental illness, where you are hearing voices, you are seeing things. Amadou in the process of that. So what we then do, there's nothing wrong with doing that as a point of reference because one, it's accessible. It's so easy to see a traditional healer. There's no need of booking. Sikanda is overbooked, she's regular and all of that. So what people do, a prophet or a traditional healer. But we must understand that there's a certain level of capital and competence that they may not have. And the thing about traditional healing, it leaves you with anxiety. I'm going to throw the bones and show you and tell you, but what to do, usually it's not there. So spirituality for me, I see it as a place where a number of people are using it as a way of understanding the world and engaging with the world. But we need to be very careful of over-reliance on spirituality or over-religiosity because we can miss things and say it's the Holy Spirit, whereas you are really
I think it's about a holistic approach. So yes, there are alternatives, make use of them, but at the same time also, there is a medical field, there's specialists, there's psychologists, there's psychiatrists, and we need to know how to navigate through all that. We can do a holistic approach which might be helpful to you. Sikandar, wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to add one thing on the social media aspect of it. I think one important thing that we also need to keep in mind is just the distinction between life on social media versus in person. And not only the sense of showing only the good parts of life, but also with the sort of criticism and the sort of exposure you may have on social media. We also need to realize that, for example, a place like Twitter, you may have 100 people saying negative things about you in a day. But what is the likelihood of 100 people in reality coming to you and saying bad things to you in a day? And I think sometimes it feels so real in that moment. But that anonymity that the people have there, that sort of inflated confidence, is not representative of what your social landscape is when you're functioning in normal society. And I think it's so important to realize that the monster in your head versus the monster in reality can be very different. And I think if you forget about that, you'll lose sight of it, and 100 people on social media will feel like 100 people in real life, which is two very different sort of things. So to just keep that in mind.
And maybe just one point to add that's kind of, you know, this whole preoccupation with likes, which speaks to me about desirability and being I mean, we all check how many times we do filters and editing because we don't want to show our best representation of who we are. So it's very careful to understand where you are and what, at the end of the day, we are going to comment. And sometimes, depending on what is your content about, So if there's no content, you're gonna get 0 likes, right? Because that's an example. So you need to be very careful about how you're using that space. It's a very dangerous thing, and many studies have been done around personality issues and how people use it. We've seen how narcissism is on social media, especially with public figures, because that's a safe space, but for you it might not be ideal.
I think also, Sanam can come in here. Someone mentioned that, yes, it's stressful to be a social media content creator, and sometimes you're getting negative thoughts, and yet because their livelihoods come from there, they have to continue doing it. But how can you integrate some maybe mental wellness or taking check of yourself? So taking a step back, just give yourself some room, and then maybe, carrying on with whatever content creation you are doing. Is there ways to deal with it in a better way so that you don't add more stress to what you're going through?
I think this is such a difficult one because, a large population in South Africa, they need to work. There needs to be one income, a second income, another income. So it's such a fine line between, okay, I need to put food on the table and I need to also look after my mental health. But I think, again, introspection, knowing yourself really well, knowing when you're bordering on burnout, I think is so important. But then having boundaries for yourself to say, okay, I'm giving myself an hour to make content, I'm giving myself another hour to do my work. And then I need to take a break. And when I take a break, I need to do absolutely nothing. I shouldn't be scrolling on TikTok. I shouldn't be, speaking to a colleague about work. I really just need to have that downtime. So having personal boundaries and boundaries for yourself is so important. But I think also to have someone to kind of check you, to say, look, okay, I'm noticing that you haven't stopped working today. Maybe take some downtime. I think that's also really important. So someone you trust, someone who knows you really well, to tell you, okay, you need to take a bit of a break right now.
Yeah. So again, it goes to your support systems. Yeah. And it's important to have them. And Vanessa had great support. Maybe you can explain how important support plays in reaching to your well-being.
Yeah, I definitely think support plays a large role, but I think you definitely need to be reliant on yourself. I think the issue around mental health is having external factors that dictate how you're feeling. And I think the key or the skill in managing your illness or your condition is being able to sort of find that balance within yourself. And so when chaos happens around you, whether you're breathing, whether you're taking medication, whatever tool you're doing, you're able to kind of be that stillness within that storm thing. So the support essentially boils down to you because, people are people.
Yeah, I guess different people have different coping skills and coping mechanisms. So for some, support is really important. Well, for others, maybe it's just being more self-aware and taking care of yourself. But yes, that small element of having support is important on a daily basis as well.
Maybe if I can just add something on, in Black communities, it's a very difficult construct. There's a trending TikTok video about bipolar and this a guy who every time you say something or you're not in it, what is your space? I mean, you grew up 10 in one house. So what space are you needing, and how do you get support in a community that does not even have an understanding of what you have? One, they don't even have the language of naming what you have. All that we know, when you are mentally unstable, we're going to say we are hlanya, you are crazy, and all of that. Now, taking you to a mental institute, it's a different ballgame. So support structures, even post-admission, we have to tread carefully around you because there's no understanding about what support means in certain communities.
And I think that comes back to communities understanding mental health. Because, again, I'm talking from context of working in communities. We run a support group for people supporting their loved ones living with mental illness. and understanding how important that support network is and helping you go through your journey towards mental wellness, it's important. But again, it's about families getting together with the loved one to go and get the help they need, and then understanding what they're going through. So education is the key to understanding what's going on. And it's interesting, Anela, that you speak about culture and mental health. And at one of the conferences that I've been to, and a gentleman stood up and he said, you know, in our black culture, we are brought up as men, that men need to be strong, and men are the caregivers, and men are people that will just do everything for everyone. And they were built up that way. So now when it's time to speak about not feeling okay, when it's okay not to be okay, it becomes more difficult for the male to express themselves. And again, Anele, I think this is where your understanding of culture comes in. And how do we work around that so that we can break the stigma and make people more aware of mental illness, but also speaking about it more openly than what they are currently doing?
Yeah, I'm a product of that myself. I've had to unlearn a lot of those behaviors. I mean, of course, I went to initiation school in Durban, and all I was told, you are a provider, you must be strong, and establish yourself. So nothing else outside that. I mean, you are taught that there's no place for pain in that initiation process. So it's a physical pain, you can imagine an emotional pain. But even how we raise young boys, it's a matter of if the little girl falls, doch, it's fine. The little boy, boy, Zubakrend, go, right? So in that time, we don't culture and socialize young boys to understand and what to feel. Now, talking about feelings, we can rather go to a chiller session on a Sunday and drink as boys than having to talk about it because it feels awkward. All we know is to find maladaptive ways. We can either talk about girls or talk about women and how we can essentialize them rather than talking about exactly. So I think we need to change the narrative. Only now we're slowly getting to understand what mental health is. But the challenging thing is black men who come to therapy, it's either they're middle class or high class because they've got the language and the capital for it. But if you think of young boys in the township, it's people like Professor Kopano Ratele, Maloselang, and all of them that are really helping us theoretically to how then to change the narrative so that township masculinity has a way of understanding what boys talk about and feeling. What does it mean to feel? If you can feel for loving someone and you express that for that person, why is it difficult to do that for yourself? All that black men need is love.
It's true. I think growing up as a male, when you fall, mother tells you, okay, dust yourself off and move on. Whereas if it's a girl, they're like, oh, sorry, my darling, let me see where you got hurt. And it's sort of, you grow up that way. I see we have a question in our audience.
So you mentioned how cultural tradition plays a huge role in how you were raised. Do you now perhaps think that, especially in a black African context, do you think that we could draw some kind of separation to say, yes, we can be tradition, but let us incorporate learnings and teachings of understanding mental health, or we strictly need to do away with traditions so we can understand the one? Because from what I'm getting, a lot of traditional teachings are rooted in dust yourself up and try again. But at the end of the day, you have an 80-year-old man who's been depressed for most of his life. You can't really diagnose this thing or put a finger on it. Versus someone who is detached from tradition but understands himself or herself better. So to me, it seems or sounds like you really can't have both coexisting at the same time, especially in African families. I know it's a very uncomfortable conversation. You can imagine growing up in a township and occasionally we need to slaughter some kind of goat. All of the men are slaughtered. The women, you know. So even those gender roles play a role in how we approach social issues, which then affect how we understand mental health issues.
Yeah, and I think for me, bro, on that note, you know, the problem with culture, it has a very compulsory heteronormative way that then hegemonic masculinity suggests that you must be this way, right? Just from a personal view, I'm gay. And for as long as I remember in how I was raised at home, there was always an exception that because you're soft, even being a psychologist, they were not surprised because it's a female job, right? So even at home, there's nothing that I've done physically, even now. Tell me about goat slaughtering and all of that, that's not me. Right? So basically, there's a thing about queer, probably male boys would be raised differently, that softness is okay because in any case you're gay. But if you're a straight boy, you do everything that a straight boy would do, and that's a culture on its own. So within hegemonic masculinity, there are certain subcultures and all of that. So we can't afford, in the way of how people think about it, to be weak. Even in funerals, you see men crying privately because I should be stronger for everyone. So our culture needs a lot of redefinition and finding softer ways that are non-hegemonic, so that it's, I always say, the only grace. Young boys born in this generation are the coolest ones because they are told, I love you, my boy. When my mom tells me I love you, my boy, I say, sure, man. A simple thing like that, but the young ones, it's okay. Mommy, I don't feel okay. And mommy just starts probing. With us, I was override. Oh, God it's there. Oh, I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
You know, so that's it.
I bring Vanessa in.
I just want to add on to that because, I mean, a lot of people assume because it's yoga that I'm coming from a very Eastern perspective, but part of my whole journey has been integrating indigenous knowledge systems in my spiritual practices with this Eastern and Western concept. And I think it's also not fair, as Black people, we're also not doing our homework. Traditional healers come in different forms. They're the ones who can give you medicine, they're the ones who can read your bones, and they're the ones who come as wisdom speakers and seekers. My mom is a psychologist, based her PhD on the wisdom seekers who are parallel to psychologists. And those are the ones that you come to for issues. So if you're going to go read your bones for your sadness, you're going to get a different interpretation. You need to go to the right healer because you will find that we don't need a Western education. We have ancient knowledge that are able to help with depression and anxiety. There was a situation where there was a lady, and I'll be very quick, who spoke about, she was a second wife, and she spoke about how the first wife was horrible, and she came to the traditional healer to kind of have some sort of medicine to get rid of her or make her see me different. This was a wisdom seeker. He gave her a sponge with herbs and said, every time she comes at you, you bite on this and hold your tongue. And this medicine will work, and in a week's time, you guys will be fine. She did it, and this is a true story. And as the lady was coming at her, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, she was just biting on the medicine and just rocking. There was no one to engage with anymore, and that pacified the lady. This wisdom seeker knew that all the time. That medicine could have been water or a placebo effect, but that's what they did in traditional healing. So don't underestimate how far our ancestors and our indigenous healers have gone in building the structures we need. We need to do the work and the homework of accessing them, which I don't think, because it's seen as taboo, we don't do the work needed.
That's true. I'll bring Sikander in as well.
I just wanted to second that point. I think one thing is for certain, we all agree that the landscape is complex. There's intricacies, there's things that we need to navigate. But I think the profoundness of understanding that we are the ones we've been waiting for is so powerful in the sense of we need to redefine some of these things as well. We need to unlearn and relearn. And I think that initiative to do so is obviously located within a framework. But I think, especially in a group like this where it's youth, I think we've realized the power of youth to be able to push back on some of these things and to be able to say, hey, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just trying to figure out how this resonates with me personally, in my lived experience, with my context. How do I negotiate through this? And I think the more comfortable we become with that, the more we can start finding sustainable ways that's going to work for us long term, beyond hegemonic masculinity, like Anela pointed out. We need to be the ones that's driving that. And like I said, it starts with conversations like this, and then we infiltrate in the ways that we need to and break some of those barriers down.
Definitely, totally agreed on. Speaking about treatments right now and the different types, we have so many treatments available for people within South Africa. Although the public health services may lack a bit because of the lack of funding. But Sanam, take us through like the type of treatment people can access to go and get the help they need if they're feeling unwell and they feel like they need the support they need.
So I think I'm going to come from a very psychologist perspective here, and I think Vanessa can talk about the more holistic side of it. But there is a distinction between counseling and psychotherapy, and I think that's one of the treatments that we can access is counseling and psychotherapy. So counseling is usually done by a registered counselor, a social worker, whilst psychotherapy is with a registered psychologist. So that's one of the treatments that we can access. There's also medication, which is prescribed by a psychiatrist. There is support groups, which I think SEDEC does a lot of support groups. There is group therapy, there's family therapy, there's couples therapy. So in terms of treatments, I think from a psychologist's point of view, I think that those are some of what we can offer.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to add in?
Just to add to that, Vanessa, a new thing that I do, actually I've been doing for quite some time. With the people that I work with, dominantly they've been healers and mostly black. I've kind of shifted the narrative to make my psychological practice more African. And what I mean by that, number one, in my office you're not going to find a Freudian. Right? So in my way, I've tried kind of integrating, even though I'm separating the two spaces, because I understand for therapy to be accessible, it has to be done in a way that is accommodating. I've got people that say, I speak a lot of English every day. Can I at least speak in my own language? That, for me, I've seen it that it creates a different vibe in therapy. But also I've seen because I work with healers that do a new thing. I walk barefoot. I have ukansi in my office because I've got people who are healers that say, I want to sit on the floor. And some of the most progressive ways that it's interesting that people come and have a trance in my room. So what I do, I have what I call a spiritual first aid kit. I don't give you, so you will find it easy for yourself. You can take a sniff, because I work with energy. So when they come with that energy, I try to neutralize it. So therapy itself, I've tried to make it more accessible for the kind of population that I work with. So we are trying, that's why we've got what we call African-centered psychology, to offer possibilities of how this complex thing that people find it difficult to do can be relatable to them.
I think I'm from an organization called the Nest Space, which we created this wellness center for people of color. Now, what was guiding us and pushing us was we want to be radical and want to be revolutionary and want to be disruptive, black yogis, black meditators, etc.
Yes.
But what we learned on our journey is that if it is neither radical nor revolutionary if it is not accessible to the poor. Period. So in any of the things that you give, and obviously we're running a business, so you have to come pay for yoga and everything, but to balance it out, there need to be resources, and that's why in the question I'm like, let's go back to self. Yes, we can have a support system, yes, we can have, but it has to come back to something that cannot be taken away from you, and that is you. So how I breathe to balance my anxiety, unless you put your hand over me and kill me, you're not taking that away from me, and that becomes radical. And it becomes accessible for people to sort of self-heal, which is something that we're moving as opposed to going to someone, paying someone, give me the tools so I don't have to come to you again. Yes. But it depends what obvious mental illness you're dealing with, the degrees to this.
We'll just go back to another video so we can view, and then we'll continue our discussion.
Yes, luckily enough, I have had a friend that's been with me since I was 6 years old. So whenever things get tough, he's kind of like a brother to me. And I just go to him with problems that I can't tell my mom or my family.
I would say I have many friends that I can go to if I was the type of person to speak about my problems, but I am really not.
My support system is definitely my mom. She's someone I can speak to about literally anything. I do have a support system. My support system is my mom and my sister.
So I'd say that person for me has to be like my girlfriend. I can't even speak to my male friends. Sometimes it's even difficult to, I feel like society kind of made men feel like it's difficult to express themselves.
I have 3 friends that I can depend on, that I always talk to about my issues whenever I'm dealing with personal issues, or when I'm going to, when I feel as if I'm getting a lot of stress about just overthinking.
I'll say my mom, yeah, she's my best friend. She's the only person I talk to most of the times.
So I really owe a lot to my parents and my friends, because those are the people that keep me going and they keep me stable in all of this that is happening, because it's easier to go to them and speak about things that aren't a norm in society to speak about, I'd say.
If anything to take from me is there is power in vulnerability and in sharing the pain, even though it feels like the scariest thing to do. Through sharing my vulnerability, I was able to find my own power. And yes, there are many resources that are structured and trained, but don't underestimate nature. Don't underestimate what you eat, where you breathe, the energy around you. That all impacts you in a way, and you'd find that that's sometimes 70% of your problem. It's just the crew that you're with. And changing that can change your mindset. The food you eat, the McDonald's that you have, I have nothing against McDonald's, but it does affect you. It's an animal that died in a certain process, not in our African traditions. You're taking on that energy as well. And yes, my mom would be rolling her eyes right now at me speaking. Call it what you want, the placebo effect or whatever, but be very mindful of what you say, where you at, what you eat, and who you have around you. And that's all I could say is integral to your health.
Okay, Sanam?
I think, I just want to reiterate that this is a shared experience. This is a collective experience. We all are going through something. And you'll be surprised how much of things we each have in common. So to use that, and another thing I really want to say is the youth and you guys, you've got the power to change things. And so I want you to feel empowered, going out of the school, to feel like, you can change the narrative. You've got the agency, really change things. So, yeah.
Okay, Vanilla?
For me, around the concept of black tax, I want to say manage your expectations of what you can do for your family. The expectations that you set with your NSFAS money, buying things and doing things and fixing things, you are setting a precedence that I've started and I will continue. So you need to manage those family responsibilities and this thing of being breadwinners. Understand this. Before you went to varsity, your home circumstances were the way they were. There's no way out of 3 years, 4 years of varsity, you can make magic. So manage your expectations of what you can do for a family and do you first. And there's absolutely nothing wrong. We must stop feeling guilty for taking care of us. We studied so hard. So if you feel like wearing Makosa, Gucci and Louis Vuitton, and just do it. But as long as you are doing it in the right way. And lastly, I think we need to really understand that as much as we go to Virgin Active, therapy must be a lifestyle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to my panel. We're just going to watch one more video before we end our session, and then we'll continue with our closing.
I would say give all your worries to the Lord, and He'll always come through for you.
Tattooed on me right now is Indomitable Spirit, which basically means, for me, once once I've known myself and once I've opened myself up to new opportunities and I know who I am, then I'll be able to get through things.
I'll say God is in control. Yeah, that's my like always affirmation. Like God is in control.
I feel like no matter what challenges you go through in life, self-belief is very important because that will carry you through everything.
My positive affirmation should be not to keep things on your mind all the time. You need to talk about it. Mine is definitely everything always aligns.
Yes, I'd like to share one affirmation, which is wishful thinking. When you have a sense of wishful thinking and you become easily connected with the grateful side or the gratitude side of yourself.
This is not the worst it could be. It could be more difficult, it could be easier, but as long as you're willing to get through it and willing to try to push through whatever issues it is that you're facing, it will get easier eventually. And this is not the end of the road for you. As long as you have, a beating heart and breath in your lungs, you're able to at least try.
I'd like to thank everyone in our audience, our viewers, and most importantly, thank you to all our panelists. You've made this conversation absolutely rich and very informative, and I think going out of here, we've learned so much that we can carry it with us when we sort of integrate the new thoughts and ideas that we've created here into our communities, at homes, in our conversations. If there are anyone that feels that they are in need of help or that is feeling overwhelmed, remember, SADC is there. Our toll-free number is 0800 567 567. Please do not hesitate to reach out. We open every single day of the year, 24 hours a day. We are there for you. So please do reach out. Thank you so much and hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye.